Okay, we're at BibleStudyManuals.net, file K94.htm, K for creation, actually. We're looking at the similarities amongst animals and people to see if there was any evolution ideas that might be supported over creationism. So we get to the blood serum. We often pointed to the blood serum similarities by evolutionists between chimpanzee and the human. But if we compare milk chemistry instead of blood serum, it's not the chimpanzee that's the closest to humans. It's the donkey that has milk chemistry almost exactly like a human mother's milk. We see distinct similarity with the garter snake relative to cholesterol to humans. Likewise, foot structure. The closest to humans is the glacial bear, not the chimpanzee and not the ape. Regarding the tear enzyme, we find that the chicken has the same chemistry in the egg to kill bacteria that we have in our eyes to kill bacteria. When it comes to blood antigen A, the butterbean is most similar to humans. The cockroach has a similar brain hormone. Notice a statement that appeared in Discover magazine the year before last, which is back in the 80s. It says the cockroach and man share a common brain hormone. Well, what we're pointing out here are the variations on a theme, similar design, not a progress of evolution from one species to the next. Otherwise, maybe apes evolved into the butterbean, and then the butterbean evolved into humans or cockroaches. It's nonsense. Similar design. And the similarities that we see are not similarities developed gradually and branch outward that would explain common ancestors, but these similarities instead are randomly spaced throughout the animal kingdom. One antigen A in the butterbean and us, cholesterol in us and also in the garter snake, and similar blood serum with the chimpanzee. But what we're seeing is not the gradual developing branching pattern, but rather what we're seeing is the mosaic, like the artist who puts the blue tile here when he needs it, and puts the blue tile there when he needs it, randomly dispersed for similar functions throughout the living world. Now that is the picture that's seen when we look at similarities. They don't come from common genetic origin. They don't fit the branching pattern. They fit the picture of a common designer who uses the various forms like a composer, variations on a theme, if you please. So, we have the answer from Stephen Jay Gould, one of the world's renowned evolutionists. Makes this point in natural history when he says, we can tell tales of improvement. In other words, telling tales involves not basing it on the evidence, but telling a story. See, telling a tale. Wow. But he says, in honest moments, we must admit that the history of complex life is more a story of multifarious variation about a set of basic designs than a saga of accumulating excellence. Now that's what we see in the fossil record. We see random complex beginning. We see variation about a set of, Gould is saying, basic designs. He said it. Dr. Patton says, I regard the failure to find a clear vector of progress in life's history as the most puzzling fact of the fossil record. Oh, that's what Gould's saying. We gave thought to impose pattern that we hope to find in a world that does not really display it. Looking at Dr. Patton's notes, he says every paleontologist knows that most species don't change. And that's bothersome to evolutionists. It brings terrible distress. They may get a little bigger or bumpier, but they remain the same species, and that's not due to imperfection and gaps, but stasis, not change at all. And yet this remarkable stasis has generally been ignored as not data. If they don't change, it's not evolution, so you don't talk about it. I think we can summarize it this way. The evidence shows us that there is a sudden and complex and diverse beginning. Continuing from that beginning, we see variation of basic designs, and not an evolving from one species into another. Yes, there are trees in the biology textbooks, but they're not from the fossil record. They're in spite of it. Trees meaning evolutionary trees. This is one species that evolved into another. But the micro variations stay within the species. Scientific Roadblocks to Whale Evolution by Frank Sherwin. Here's an example of this. Wrote a little poem, I guess. Hamlet, do you see yonder cloud that's almost in shape of a camel? Polonius, ye by the mass, and 'tis like a camel indeed. Hamlet, methinks it's like a weasel. Polonius, is back like a weasel. Hamlet, or like a whale. Polonius, very like a whale. I get this. I guess I don't know what he's getting at. Let's see. The American public, including young people in our tax-supported public schools, is constantly indoctrinated with a curious idea that people and whales have come from bacteria. One legitimate answer to the question, what is life, is bacteria. Any organism is, if not itself a live bacterium, is then a descendant, one way or another, of a bacterium, or, more likely, mergers of several kinds of bacteria. That's in the textbooks, but it's not in real life. Naturalists shroud such whimsical statements with the mantle of science. Indeed, one encounters many bizarre explanations for the origin of the species when such strange fiction grips biology. A popular commentary, Just So Story, tells how land mammals ventured back into the ancient seas and became whales. The idea was presented by Darwin in the first edition of his book, Origin of Species. The naturalist stated, I can see no difficulty in a race of bears being rendered by natural selection, more and more aquatic in their habits, with larger and larger mouths, till the creature was produced as monstrous as a whale. Interestingly, Darwin retracted this example in all later editions of his book. This has not stopped later evolutionists. For example, the ancient ancestors of whales, writes the late Sir Gavin de Beer, had dentitions, teeth, enabling them to feed on large animals, but some took to preying on fish and rapidly evolved teeth like sharks. Next, some whales preyed on small cuttlefish and evolved a reduced dentition, smaller teeth. Finally, the whalebone whales, having taken to feeding on enormous numbers of small shrimps, also evolved rapidly. There's no evidence of this. This imaginary tale explains nothing. No one was there to observe, measure, or take notes regarding the above process. Thus, it is idle speculation. It should not be considered science. When we investigate whale evolution from a non-whale ancestor, the problems seem as enormous as the creatures themselves. In 1982, a British science writer and evolutionist said, the problem for Darwinians is in trying to find an explanation for the immense number of adaptations and mutations needed to change a small and primitive earthbound mammal living alongside and dominated by dinosaurs into a huge animal with a body uniquely shaped so as to be able to swim deep in the oceans, a vast environment previously unknown to mammals. All this had to evolve in at most 5 to 10 million years, about the same time as the relatively trivial evolution of the first upright walking apes into ourselves. Evolutionist Michael Denton, he described the problem of such a fantastic transition by saying, we must suppose the existence of innumerable collateral branches leading to many unknown types. One is inclined to think in terms of possibly hundreds, even thousands of transitional species on the most direct path between a hypothetical land ancestor and the common ancestor of modern whales. We are forced to admit with Darwin that in terms of gradual evolution, considering all the collateral branches must have existed in the crossing of such gaps, the number of transitional species must have been inconceivably great. It is no wonder that the evolutionary origin of whales remains controversial amongst zoologists. We have a physiology problem that is not really addressed within this imaginary tale. A number of land animals have been proposed as the whale's ancestor, including Darwin's bear, grazing ungulates, and wolf-like carnivores, and the hippopotamus. In each case, the morphological differences are significant. If whales, which are cetaceans, did devolve from land animals, they did so at an unbelievable rate, accruing an amazing number of beneficial mutations and adaptations. Mammal going into the ocean has to float, The skeletal features would need to change radically, as well as the physiology, the collective functions of an organism. For example, the supposed early whale, Ambulocetus, drank fresh water, probably throughout its life, 50 million years ago, they say. And Indocetus was a saltwater drinker 48 million years ago. This means that in perhaps 3 million years or two, there had to be an extreme change in the physiology of these creatures. Salt to fresh water. These proto-whales would have had to mutate in a beneficial manner to produce the above physiological adaptations. However, science shows that organisms don't survive a rapid rate of mutation. Additionally, a popular encyclopedia recently stated, presumably various physiological mechanisms for handling oxygen debt and lactic acid buildup, as well as the development of blubber for fat storage and for temperature regulation, evolved early, though evidence of the evolutionary history is unavailable. So the whale could be accommodating himself to sea life underneath the sea, many fathoms below the first surface. Less obvious essential design features would ensure the cetaceans against hypothermia. Cetaceans, I guess. Mammals are warm-blooded creatures designed by the Creator to function at a constant body temperature, higher than fish, reptiles, or amphibians. Maintaining a core body temperature while being bathed in an ocean of cold water would be a definite problem for them. However, whale fins have fascinating biological structures called counter-current heat exchangers to conserve heat. Also, zoologists have recently discovered exchangers located at the base of the massive tongue of gray whales. These exchangers are a series of blood vessels arranged so that they, too, function as heat exchangers to minimize heat loss. The gray whale would otherwise lose much body heat through the tongue's extensive vascularization. Macroevolutionists cannot appeal to natural selection to produce amazing structures like the counter-current system, although comparative physiologists present counter-current exchange found in the gills and kidneys as structures that repeatedly evolved. Indeed, no known process can turn a four-legged land creature into a blue whale. Natural selection can act only on those biologic properties that already exist. It cannot create properties in order to meet adaptational needs. Specifically, natural selection cannot produce new structures, as is often stated in evolutionary just-so stories. It can only preserve the best adapted varieties which occur by other means. So we have problems from head to toe in the whale. We can learn about this later.